Hey, everybody, it's the Plant-Based Business Hour. I'm Elysabeth Alfano. So happy to have you with me back in my studio. The last couple of weeks I've been on the road, and when you are a production team of one, like I am, it can be quite calamitous on the road. So thank you for your patience in these last couple of podcasts as I've tried to work the internet as well as traffic in San Francisco, getting to places on time, being a little bit harried and running around tasting cultivated seafood. What a joy that was at Wild Type, but it was quite the wild ride for the interview. So thank you everybody for your patience. As you know, I will be back on the road again because I tell you every podcast, I'm heading back to New York for Future Food Tech. That summit happens June 21st and June 22nd. You must join me there. It is the Alternative Proteins Summit of Future Food Tech, and I'll be speaking, but the list of speakers is long and fantastic. So I hope you can join me there. And I'll be talking there about things like water. So one of the things I like to talk about a lot on this show is a life cycle analysis done by the University of Michigan, a Beyond Meat burger, but it really could be any plant-based burger, as compared to a beef burger, uses 99% less water, 93% less land, produces 90% fewer greenhouse gas emissions, and uses 46% less energy. So where do we get these kind of stats? And let's focus on the key stat, water. We all know that water is scarce. We all think, at least I do, although we're about to find out, that it's in limited supply. I don't believe that we can actually make more water, although perhaps I'm wrong on that. And what happens as we continue to go down this calamitous path? Climate change is here. It's no longer something we're talking about for the future. So I want to bring on my guest today, who is a water expert, a water investor, a sustainability pioneer, Thomas Schumann. Thank you for being with me.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's get into this. What exactly is a water expert, sustainability pioneer? We can wrap our minds around, but even a water investor. Explain to me what it is you do and why we are in a critical period.
Well, let's maybe start with the critical period. I think you mentioned it's the century, the water century, but it's in general the century to really make a difference. So the United Nations established in 2018 that this is the water action decade, so 2018 to 2028. What's also important to know is that the UN Agenda 2030, which is a plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity, started in 2020. So this agenda also calls to transform our world. So this is really the decade of everything being transformed to sustainability. And when we talk about sustainability, water is obviously at the heart of it. Water is life. The climate crisis is a water crisis. Climate expressed itself primarily through water. And it's very, very important to understand that we get the mainstream narrative right, because at the moment the focus is on climate, but we really experience primarily the effects of climate through water. And that's in the form of drought, in the form of changing precipitation. We have wildfire risk. We have changes in biodiversity. We have excessive precipitation, and the list goes on and on and on. So it's really all about water.
People are agreeing with you. Those watching us live, thank you, Tom Vensil, for that comment. Sorry to disrupt you because I see you were talking. No, please go ahead. It's all about water. I think of climate change as having perhaps 4, 5 really great impacts, and that would be its use of land. And so there's less arable land meaning the land that we farm to feed ourselves, less arable land, of course, less water, also more greenhouse gas emissions. So this cycle of just heating up faster and faster, it grows exponentially as we have more greenhouse gases in the air and the temperature continues to rise. More food insecurity because of climate change. And then I guess I think of climate refugees. So water's in there, but I don't think of it as the only expression of climate change. Perhaps you can tell me why you see that it is.
Well, I think it's the main expression of climate change because it really affects every single human, social and financial cycle operation on the planet. Just to put it in simpler layman's terms, 5 days without water, a human dies. No business can produce its product or service without water. So we really have to understand that water is the foundation of all the other 16 sustainable development goals. And in terms of my water stewardship work and my purpose-driven mission, I'm specifically focused on United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 6, which is access to clean water and sanitation for all. Going back to what you mentioned in terms of one of the effects of climate, yes, the human mass migration it's a big problem, and I think at the moment we're looking at roughly 1.2 billion people being displaced by 2050 because of climate change, drought, and the effects with it. And then what also figures in, and that maybe builds the bridge to what you're doing, Elizabeth, is mass hunger. It's global food security. And that's also at the moment exacerbated, obviously, by situations like the war in Ukraine, rising inflation, rising food prices. But again, at the heart, the key driver is water. I always say that, and it's not my slogan. I picked it up driving up to UC Davis on the 5 Freeway where my son studies in UC Davis, and it says basically, food grows where water flows.
Yes, 100%. So water being at the heart of the majority of the climate calamities that we're having. Just to put in perspective your number, 1.2 billion people, at 2050, that will be more than 10% of the global population. So quite a few people will be displaced by climate change, and therefore things like lack of water. But why now? I feel like this conversation about water has been happening for decades. First of all, are we paying attention now more than before? And is it more dire now than it was before? Because this isn't really a new conversation.
It is more dire now because of climate change, also because of exponential population growth, and because of the radical mismanagement of water and the lack of appreciation of water. Another component is that water is a precious resource. It's not a commodity. Very, very important to understand. It's a human right granted by the United Nations, I think in 2015. So we have to be very careful with the narrative and with the understanding of the value of water. But water never received the attention, the appreciation, and the respect and the price it deserves. And now, with climate change, these situations rise to daily headline risk, and very, very grave situations. And now, luckily, global financial markets are picking it up as well, because we're currently in a financial revolution, which is the convergence of the environment with financial markets. So to date, you have to just imagine that financial markets never priced environmental risk. It was completely foreign to them. It was all about financial metrics and financial risks. And there was a gross failure and a gross neglect, and now we're starting to pay for that.
I want to read, I think this was in Green Money, you made this quote: "It will not be possible to achieve a fair, efficient, and sustainable allocation of fresh water unless water is priced in all its uses to reflect its opportunity cost and scarcity value, including any negative environmental externalities." So what you're saying here is that water has a price. It should be factored into any cost of goods sold, this kind of formulation. Is this what you mean here by saying this? Or because, as you say, water is a human right, should be available to all. We're going to talk about that as well, how it isn't. But from this statement, what would you like to see happen in the capital markets and via governments?
What I would like to see happening actually is what happened last week at Davos. At Davos, for the first time in history, a global commission on the economics of water was established, and that's a great start. It comes a little bit late, but it's a great start. Expert a commission that now looks at the value of water at net zero, water net zero, the balances of output and input, and also how global governments can come together and create a global harmonized, standardized water governance and water rules and water regulations. I want to even go further. I think going forward, we need a water credit or water coin, similar to pricing carbon. In terms of the value of water embedded in products and services, you cannot produce any product without water, which is somewhere derived in the value chain. Just to give you an idea, and again, in layman's terms or layman's samples, how can it be that in California, which is the fifth largest economy in the world, just ahead of India and behind Germany, we're now paying for one gasoline of one gallon of fuel of gasoline $6, and water is actually priced less than 25 cents a gallon. It just doesn't make sense, right?
It doesn't make sense. And yet I want to follow your logic here. I believe I read that, and we're talking about it now, that water is a human right and it should be available to all. And it isn't currently. We can talk about the disparities around the world. But how do you see water being available to all if it were actually to be priced in its correct form?
Well, it's a distribution issue. It's the same thing with food. It's the same thing with capital, right? And we're living in the so-called Western civilized world. We have to be honest, and we have caused this climate crisis substantially with our ongoing overconsumption, with our disregard for carbon, well, disregard for water. So I think it all first starts with behavioral change and with education and awareness and consciousness. And once that's there, and unfortunately, as humanity only changes once it's exposed to suffering and pain. Then I think we can have some common sense and see how going forward, how can we establish an equitable, sustainable use and price for water worldwide. That obviously has to figure in that there's certain countries and certain nations, they might not be able to pay certain prices that which are developed in the Western world. We also have to take into consideration there's such a thing as virtual water. So at the moment, we as the Western civilized world, we're exploiting the emerging markets. For example, if we import beef from let's say Latin America, there's a value for virtual water because we're using their water. That they use to grow their cattle and their beef, and we're not paying for it, and still buying the product at a fairly low cost and then selling it here. So we're basically we're stealing their water without paying a fair value to the country where the products are coming from.
I just love everything that you're saying, and I do want to decipher it here for everybody. So are you talking about a water tax? And would it be the consumer that pays the price of water? So we always talk about this in meat and dairy, that first of all, they're so subsidized, no one's actually paying their real price. But then because the externalities of which you speak aren't factored in, so externalities like the increased cost of healthcare, because meat has animal proteins and saturated fat, and so that causes lifestyle diseases like heart disease and diabetes and even some forms of cancer. Well, no one's paying those costs, except the individuals. So but the externalities are not paid by the companies producing these products that are causing these issues, causing polluted water, something we'll get to about animal agriculture. So are you saying a tax on the corporations, or do you want to see the prices flow down to the individual buying the item?
Again, I think we need to look at, where is the heaviest water use on a global scale. That's currently, as you know, it's animal agriculture. Agriculture in general, it's 70 to 80% of global freshwater use. So obviously these industries need to be taxed. And then same with a carbon coin or carbon credit. Whoever is a good water steward should be rewarded. Whoever mismanages water should be penalized. And I think once we start on the production, commercial, industrial side, then we can create some equity towards the consumer. And that will completely disrupt the market and shift the market. Because if, for example, the price for water is continue to going up, then nobody can afford anymore to buy poultry or beef, and that will automatically shift the consumption to plant-based and more vegan, more vegetarian choices.
Yes, of course, naturally it will, because if we actually address the issue, we would realize that we are wasting our resources, water being the primary one, but also deforestation, et cetera, others. And if we're not going to manage our resources better, we're not going to get more land, more trees, more water, unless we do something about it. Now, can we do something about it? I want to see if we can make more water for ourselves. I think I read somewhere that there might be some plans in action having to do with pulling water from the air. But before I get there, I want to share my screen. So sorry for those of you who are on podcast and can't see this, but I want to share my screen. Just give a couple of stats here. I'm getting this from the U.S. government website on water usage. So you see here, folks, if you're getting a pound of chicken, you're using 500 gallons. If you're doing one egg, is 50 gallons of water, and 460 gallons of water are used for 1/4 pounder. So you see the high intensity and water use that goes into animal agriculture. Again, I'm getting this from the U.S. government education website on water. I'm going to stop sharing now, but
Yeah, I
whoops.
mean, that's great information. Also, maybe if I can guide our audience towards treehugger.com, tree like the treehugger.com, that has a water footprint for all the different vegetables, beverages, etc., meats we consume. One of your, I think you mentioned earlier when we prepared for the podcast, you wanted to ask me what my favorite snack is.
Yes.
And, I really had to think hard, Elizabeth, and I opted for the banana. But then a little bit more research, and I found out that one banana has a water footprint of, I think, 400 gallons of water.
Because it's transported all around the world, and the water's coming with the transportation cost.
Transportation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So, having said that, and I think when you really look at the water footprint, I mean, at least for people who are aware and conscious and want to make a change, it triggers something. So I opted now to tell you that that my favorite snack is popcorn. But then again, I looked up, a kernel of popcorn, a cup of kernels of popcorn requires still, I think, 127, I think, is liters of water. So we put that in perspective. That's still highly irresponsible, at least for me, knowing that, for example, at the moment, every 48 seconds, a human is dying because of hunger and drought in East Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So these are just, the facts and figures, we just at least have to be aware about to create change.
But it's worrisome when you have a growing population going to almost 10 billion by 2050, according to the United Nations, and you see what agriculture demands to feed these people. It really is an argument for precision fermentation and cultivated meat, these scenarios where you're really limiting your water source and the time that you don't have to cut down trees to grow grains to feed animals who need water, and then cutting down more trees, more grains, more food, over the span of a year and a half, which is no natural span at all, because of course natural life would be much longer. And and then you avoid having the animals, so you avoid all of their defecation into the water supply. So it's not just access to water, it's access to clean water. And these industries are polluting our water systems. So you see the argument for, vertical farming and using your water more judiciously. But you mentioned that to do this, you really need to start people thinking and having behavioral change. What is the likelihood that will happen?
It has to happen. It has to happen because we cannot afford it anymore. And I think when people are confronted, we always feel the effects in our checkbook, in our account. When people are confronted with not being able to afford certain luxury goods, luxury items any longer, or luxury foods, then they will shift. And one of the perversions is as well, if you look at the logistics and transportations of our current food. For example, a certain fruit being harvested in Latin America, then shipped to Asia to being packaged and then brought over to the US. I mean, who came up with that idea?
Yes, yeah. The inefficiency is gobsmacking. Just from a business standpoint, what business person would sign up to be so inefficient with their money and their limited resources? So is water a limited resource? Obviously, right now we're having issues, but I think I read something about pulling water from the air to make more water and moving water from Greenland. Maybe you can tell me about these two projects.
Water is not, and this is very, very important to understand, because there's always the argument for scarcity and there's not enough water. It's a distribution problem. We have atmospheric rivers that they're huge, they're tremendous. So water has not changed its volume since the start of Earth. It just changed its form because it manifests itself in three different forms. There's liquid, there's the gas, and there's also
I see.
There's also the ice form. the director of the United Nations University Institute in Canada for Water Health and the Environment just came out last week. It was published on The Hill, in The Hill, the newspaper in The Hill. And he published a new book and calls all nations to tap into unconventional water resources. Water resources we haven't considered yet, which is, for example, the Arctic, which is the Antarctica. Atmospheric water generation, water from air. The Egyptians have done that thousands of years ago. Water found deep in sea and land-based aquifers, water that is held and transported in thousands of tankers and ships for ballast. And also towing and carving icebergs. So there are all kinds of different unconventional sources we haven't even looked yet.
But wouldn't that be working against ourselves by impacting icebergs? Don't we need those icebergs to keep global temperature mitigated? Global temperature increases mitigated?
At the moment, one of the challenges we have, with the Arctic and Antarctica is sea level rise. So if we can mitigate sea level rise and all these trillions of liters of water that are running off every year into the oceans and becoming non-usable because they're becoming ocean salt water, let's start there. Let's capture the water there. But in all reality, it's again very, very simple. It starts with human behavior, with changing of habits, with changing of perspectives and paradigms. And it really, at the bottom, it is reduce, reuse, recycle.
Say that again.
It's reduce, reuse, recycle.
Okay.
That goes for everything. That goes for everything.
Okay. Right? But I challenge you a little bit here, because I often am in conversations where people say like, oh my gosh, I've shortened my showers to 7 minutes. And I just think like, great, but this isn't where the impact is. There's a statistic that I get from Paul Shapiro's book, Clean Meat, where it takes, let me make sure that I quote this 100% right. You can save more water by having a family of 4 give up 1 chicken dinner than having all of them forgo showering for 6 months. It is behavioral change, but I feel like it's really holding those who, I'll call it water abuse, are misusing our limited resources. They need to be held accountable. Basically, they need to pay. And at what point, and you just cut me off if I'm taking this to the extreme, at what point is polluting our water a crime against humanity? For 1, 2, 3 companies, industries, even we'll call it industries. We won't pick out one company in and of itself. At what point are those responsible, those in higher level management, committing crimes against humanity?
Well, you saw it in Flint, Michigan. Unfortunately, we still have a system here where people get off with it, with these crimes against humanity. And I think Michigan had officially, 12 victims, but unofficially it was, I think, almost 100. So there need to be harsh consequences for polluting the water. And unfortunately, I have to say that as well, being in that space now for 10 years, Elizabeth, we're drinking polluted water every single day from the tap.
Yeah.
And, the latest pollution is all the prescription drugs that people flush down the toilet that we don't have yet in the water management systems, refined filtering equipment yet to filter these out. Then we have microplastics. We're polluting ourselves every single day, and we're not aware of it.
Or we are aware of it. You might be nicer. You might be a nicer person than me. I think we are aware of it. I think those who, I think people know, but it's hard to get reelected with asking people to make a difference in their behavior. So I am a little bit more
That is very true. And to my knowledge, there has not been one politician here in the United States who raised the price on water because it's not popular.
And I'm going in different tangents only because, folks, you probably can tell this subject is newer to me. So if I'm asking really elementary questions, it's because I'm trying to wrap my mind around this in full, probably like you are, my listeners. When you say, I'm going backwards and then I'll come back to this politically, how do we raise the price of water? If you look around the world, you mentioned Africa. So Africa, perhaps one of the continents more affected by our lessening water supply. If that country can't pay like other countries, then are you thinking of USAID loans in water? Am I going to the extreme here? Do you see water being something of a currency? Don't know if I'm even expressing myself correctly.
Yeah, I think that's a very good thought, but I also want to stray away from loans because historically, again, the Western civilized world has perfected to put the developing emerging nations into slavery through debt instruments, right? So we want to stay away from that. So I think it's very, very important to focus on equity. And if we speak about equity, then again, if we would have a global water credit or global water coin that's backed by central banks, then the central banks need to figure out how they can create an equitable solution for countries with a lower GDP or with higher water challenges to balance out the supply to still arrive at net zero. So as you can see, it cannot be done without involving the financial markets and financial instruments.
Yes. So sorry, that was going to be my next question. So this is an opportunity for banks, I would think.
Absolutely.
And are they seeing this? You, like me, I'm always talking about plant-based innovation, alternative proteins, and animal agriculture, our current food supply system. You as a water steward are going around speaking about investing in water and other things. Are people paying attention? Are they getting it?
Not yet, unfortunately.
Really?
They're getting it on an emotional level. They're not getting it on a practical level. And again, that's also the fault of the mainstream media, which still purports the false narrative of climate. Again, we can survive high carbon environments. We cannot survive without water. So that's kind of like my daily mission when I'm speaking at conferences where we met, for example, at the Wall Street Green Journal, or I'm going to speak at Environmental Finance Asia soon, to really pivot that narrative and to not only elevate, but to ideally push water above climate. And that's obviously a Herculean task. So to answer your question, no, the focus at the moment is on climate, and the focus at the moment from the financial players is on carbon credit. They have figured that out. They still don't understand yet the value of water.
But once they have a carbon credit, don't you think they'll just copy that and they'll have a water credit?
I think it gives us a very good pathway or benchmark or blueprint or even framework. But then again, it would have to be refined and customized because water is not a commodity; it cannot be replaced. And
although you're saying we can make more by pulling it from the air.
That's one form. Yes, that's one form. Yeah. Atmospheric water generation, and that has existed already for thousands of years. I'm originally from Germany. In World War II, it was used on the German U-boats to generate fresh water for the crew, and atmospheric water generation, which are kind of like I would say evolved or updated air conditioners, have been used for a long time. You can have them on for residential use, but also for industrial use. Again, this is one tool in the toolboxes. There are many, many other tools in terms of water technology. We have smart metering. We have now the IoT of water. We have the latest water filtration. Obviously, desalination is an absolutely outdated water supply alternative. It's way too costly. It causes environmental concerns because you have the brine that you take out of the water and just discharge it back into the ocean. So you have a high level of salinity, and that destroys marine life. That's why we just also had luckily in San Diego, we had the rejection of the proposal from Poseidon to build a 1.4 billion desalination plant. So there's certain countries, they run on desalination, like I believe it's Kuwait and Qatar, but it's definitely not the future.
Will we get this in time? So let me rephrase that. I always say wars are going to be fought over food and water. Are we destined to implode?
That's a good question. Maybe we should ask the Vice President Kamala Harris, because she just recently also mentioned that soon wars will be fought over water. I don't want to go there. Water, you have to understand from a more spiritual or metaphysical level, water has always been about unity, not about division. And interesting enough, people always come together when it's about water. And water, for example, not only in the Bible but also in the Quran is considered considered mercy. So water doesn't discriminate, water doesn't segregate, water nourishes, water is life. And I think water provides us in these very tumultuous, radical, transforming times to really come together and put all bipartisan issues aside and really focus on what we need. And what we need is clean air and clean water. That's what every human needs. And until 7.8 billion stakeholders understand that, we will not see the rapid change that we need.
So who can invest in better water sources, mitigating water misuse? Is it governments? Is it corporations? Or maybe it's the corporations that should be taxed, but it's also capital investment for them to change their ways. I know you are a water investor. Maybe you can explain to us who you see investing in this and how you are a part of that.
Well, I'm a little bit biased and prejudiced, because you just mentioned, I'm a water investor, water security investor. I personally think that water is the single largest impact investment opportunity in the history of mankind. To answer your question, who should and ideally should focus on investing in water? It's everyone. It's the corporations, it's individuals, it's retail investors, institutional investors, et cetera, et cetera. Let me say that just to bring the focus a little bit back to the United States, we have a 1 trillion, and that's trillion, water infrastructure financing gap. So where shall that money come from? It has to come from the public and private sectors. And I think it's a major investment opportunity. And every time you invest in water or carbon or plant-based, you have to go long. It's not about shorting.
Yes,
you have to go long on the planet. It's patient capital. My company developed 3 years ago the first benchmark equity index, TSC Water Security Index, to track water risk and equity. So basically, we're looking at in the Eurozone, in the US, and worldwide, we're looking at the S&P 500, the MSCI ACWI, and the Eurostoxx 50, and looking at these constituents. Are they good water stewards, or do they need to catch up on it? And it's very, very interesting because, again, global capital markets have not priced in water yet in indices and investment allocations. And water risk permeates across all asset classes. So if we don't, so the business investment case for water is, if we don't invest in water now, we're going to pay the heavy price in the future, not only because of further water challenges, but also because of major underperformance, of major business failures, stranded assets, bankruptcies, loss of capital, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's only on the financial end. That doesn't even figure in, the human casualties and destruction of the environment. So that's the investment case for investing in water and water stewardship.
This is always so surprising to me that corporations that desperately need water to continue to produce anything aren't caring for their most precious limited resource, water, and also land use. I mean, I'm talking about land use if you're in agriculture, animal agriculture specifically. So why is it that corporations aren't waking up to this? It's just so counterintuitive.
They do care about, but they don't care about in the right in the right context. So let me give you for example. Let's go to the tech industry, and I don't want to badmouth anyone. It's really for me about just raising awareness and ideally encouraging, inspiring, igniting, incentivizing folks to become good water stewards. But when, for example, Google or Facebook go in and build a new data center, the first thing they're looking for is water. So where's the water coming from? For example, if they set up a new factory in Arizona, it's coming from the groundwater supply. So the first deal that's being made is with the municipalities, and that's at the cost of the water users, of the residents. This is all not being publicized, but you cannot run any data center without water.
Yeah.
You cannot build any chip factory without water, semiconductors.
Yeah.
You cannot mine coins, blockchain without water. So there is an awareness, but again, water is not properly treated and respected. It's not properly priced. And unfortunately, with a lot of corporations, they are still in the paradigm of Gordon Gekko, Wall Street, greed is good. And that needs to quickly change to greed for good, for the common good. So again, behavioral, psychological, mind change. And then again has to come from financial pressure, from penalizing, for raising taxes, et cetera, et cetera. Otherwise, these players will not change their ways of doing business. Luckily, and there's a silver lining, there's hope. The SEC most likely will soon come out with new climate risk disclosures, which will further not only pressure but also incentivize corporates, to become good stewards of carbon, good stewards of water.
Yeah, the SEC, for those who don't know, they have just put out a request for comments about tracking through the various stages of businesses. So all through the supply chain, all the way up to the final good that is sold to the consumer, how people use energy and land and water. And so tracking the elements that are the public elements that are used for production. So we'll see if in a better attempt to define ESG so that people really understand when they're investing in ESG, what really are they investing in? And are these companies, like you were talking about the constituents in your own indices, and we'll get to your indices in a second, Thomas, are these constituents really being good stewards of our precious resources, or are indeed they abusing them?
Yes. And then let me say that too. I mean, if you asked investors, aren't you interested in creating positive impact and profit, sustainable long-term profit? Who would say no?
No, everyone says yes.
In their right mind. Okay. So it's basically creating these opportunities, creating these solutions, creating these investment products for investors to go into them, invest in them, and then see by the performance and the impact measured that this is the right path forward.
Mm-hmm.
As simple as that.
And I do think they'll be rewarded for this. So we talk about the role of the capital markets here. And I do think people are willing to pay for that. They're willing to invest in that. They're willing to invest in those companies that are doing the right thing. So many people are legacy investors, thinking of their children and their next generations, their grandchildren's generation. And they want to invest for a future so that their kids and grandkids can have a planet similar to the planet they experience now today. I think people are very willing to invest in this. So in a way, again, I'll just kind of reiterate what I was saying before, but maybe in another way, I'm amazed by the short-sightedness. And although we are a society of short-sightedness, both in how we trade financially and how we vote,
yes,
everyone wants the same thing. So why aren't we able to make the changes?
Action. It's all about action now. Yeah. It's
yes.
not about NATO anymore. No action talk only. No action talk only. It's about action.
Yes. Well, it's frustrating because I wonder if politicians, we talk about the role of the capital markets and the role of the individual to change their behavior. Although please, folks, don't focus on your shower. I mean, go ahead and take a shorter shower, but you really want to change your purchasing habits to know, for example, Beyond Meat Burgers, 99% less water. Okay. We talked about that in the beginning. But now, what about the role of government? So when you talk about Google or Facebook or some tech company going to Arizona, where obviously water is going to be a shortage, and they first look to see that there is enough water and what the water table is like beneath them. And the government, and I don't know these facts, so I'm asking you, and you might not know either. So that municipality is giving them water rights for free? Or, I mean, obviously the value there is so obvious. Is it truly in the sense of graft and trying to get political votes? Or why would that water not be charged a premium? That municipality could make so much money and Google could pay it. So why is it discounted?
Because we're still living, unfortunately, at the tail end of shareholder capitalism. If these municipalities and decision makers would understand that it's now all about stakeholder capitalism, they would first look at their fiduciary duties and responsibilities towards their residents, towards their citizens, and based upon that, make a sound, prudent decision how to engage, or if to engage at all, with the corporates.
Those are the people who vote. So I again, sometimes this stuff is counterintuitive, but I say often on this show, I mean, it's not just with the use of water, it's also how we use our resources and giving it all to animal agriculture. We're really feeding animals, not people. I mean, if the goal is to feed people, then why wouldn't we just give food to people? Instead, we give all this food to animals, and animals need more land, more water, more time. I'm talking about all the grains and seeds and vegetables that we grow. We could give that food that has fiber and protein to people. We don't. We give it to animals. and they're poor calorie converters. So why are we wasting our calories like that when we've got many people that go hungry, and that will only grow? So this kind of backwards logic is something we wrestle with a lot on this show. So it's not new, but it is counterintuitive. And I think to myself, my gosh, are we trying to get the Darwin Award? Again, you might be a little happier than I, Thomas. You are not jaded. Okay, let us talk about your financial products. What I have been sharing the screen off and on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'll do it again now. So sorry for the folks who are listening on podcast, but you yourselves, you can go to right. You can go to thomasschumann.com, right?
Yes. Yeah. So just a bit about my background, and I don't want to turn it into a commercial plugin, but since you're asking, so it's a personal story. 10 years ago, I asked myself, what can I do with my life? I was 47 years old. Where can I really create a legacy, impact? Where can I get up in the morning with a purpose-driven mission? And water came to mind, and I fell in love with water, and that's when my journey started in 2011. And I helped water technology companies with their financing needs, also some large-scale desalination projects in California. And then I realized in 2017, really to move the needle is, to provide global capital markets with the tools, the insights, investment products to invest in water stewardship. And that's when I developed the first world's first ever water security index. We have a global version, we have a US version, we have a European version. There are very low tracking errors to the benchmark legacy indices of MSCI, S&P, and Euro stocks. And actually, we came in the process also upon a water footprint, which has never been measured or shared with global capital markets. So the water footprint of our indices is on average 50% lower than the water footprint of the benchmark indices I just mentioned. Also, what we came about is that the carbon footprint is 25% lower on average than the existing benchmark indices. That means a company who has good water governance, who cares about their water management, usually also handles their carbon already in a very responsible manner. So this is what we're doing in public equity, and we're launching now out of Europe, because Europe is driving, specifically London, is driving the global movement of ESG, responsible investing, sustainable finance. The first UCITS ETF. In collaboration with the fourth largest US bank and the fourth largest asset manager. I cannot mention the names yet because we're shortly before signing the final agreements. And so we launched the first UCITS ETF, and hopefully soon UCITS ETF, i.e. an ETF actually, not a UCITS ETF, an ETF, a 40 Act fund will follow in the US. And then on the private equity side, I'm still involved with three water supply ventures. One is called Sky H2O. It's a California innovation company, and they developed a technology that provides water supply through atmospheric water generation, large scale, industrial scale. Another project of mine is Project Greenland. That's in the early stages. That's I think I mentioned that before. That's not exploiting, but capturing Greenland's ice water. Greenland says that themselves. That's their program they established 10 years ago, capturing their ice and water and store it and transfer it to water poor regions. That's obviously a Herculean task, a mammoth project. And then I have another project called Global Water First, and they provide water technology for communities to become self-reliant water and energy. They're currently on three different countries, three different continents, installing their purification. So I'm working in the public and private space, equity space, impact space, to advance my purpose-driven mission. Again, it's water security. And then just actually today, I also started to involve Hollywood. I will co-produce the first ever social impact entertainment docuseries on water. Social impact entertainment is quickly grasping Hollywood as well. And we're basically similar to the show, like, I don't know if you have ever seen the show Cooked on Netflix. We're taking the audience around the world and have different storytellers and stories in different countries, how they manage their water supply, what challenges they face, et cetera, et cetera. So it's edutainment, education, and entertainment. I believe it's very, very important, how you create impact and how you shift people's behavior and paradigms. It has to be in an educational, but also entertaining, inspiring, encouraging fashion. Because at the end of the day, we want to focus on faith, hope, and action, not on scarcity and on fear. and stress, etc. I think that's very, very important, specifically given these volatile, uncertain times that we're living in. But these are times with tremendous opportunity.
I just want to go back and give the cliff notes a bit to everybody. So when I was showing on the screen those indices have constituents in them, and those constituents are those companies that are better regulating, better using, better accounting for their water. And what Thomas was saying is that those companies, when grouped together, that group is doing better than what people often refer to as, let's say, a benchmark. And they say, oh, how does it do against the S&P 500 or these other indices that people often use as benchmarks? So I know not everyone here on this podcast is in the financial realm. So I just want to make sure you understand. He's talking about his group of water conscious companies perform better than just generally financial indices, like let's say the S&P 500, but also they do better on carbon, because, and that would stands to reason, right? If you're caring about your water, you're probably also caring about your greenhouse gas emissions, your carbon emissions, et cetera. So now those indices are for not for retail. So it's not, you couldn't just, hop on your Robinhood and get into the water index, but apparently there is a water ETF coming. So Thomas, you'll have to keep us tuned on that. Very exciting. So that would indicate to me that people are getting it. Now, in the beginning of this conversation, you were saying, oh, capital markets don't quite yet get this, but capital markets get making money. And when you have limited resources, there's money to be made. So maybe you could talk about predictions, let's say in the next 5 years, or maybe even 3 years. Where do you think we're going? I'll say in the capital markets, and then also in just using our water resources. Where do you think we are in 3 years?
Well, I think in general, the next 5 years really require conscious daily action implementation, sustainable investment solutions, products, services to transform our world. And that's basically aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Capital markets are already picking up on that very, very quickly. I've been in that space now for 5 years, and I've been in different industries before, and I've never seen an industry moving that fast. It's now really all about all ESG, responsible investing, sustainable finance. We already have that problem, unfortunately, now too, about greenwashing. So everybody wants to be green now. Everybody wants to be a good steward. Everybody wants to, being a responsible corporate steward. And so it's an aspiring process. And yes, you're right. I mean, if there's impact and profit, and if the business investment case for ESG and sustainable investing is clear and understood and is proven, then obviously all these capital flows will move in there. That's what we're seeing already. So again, I said it before, we are in the midst of a financial revolution where the environment and society, I have to add that, are converging with financial markets.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time. I'll say we see this at VegTech Invest when we talk about investing in alternative proteins and plant-based innovation for a more sustainable consumption, better utilizing our resources like land and water, and only focusing on companies that are innovating to replace animals so that we can have our resource, because animal use is so exorbitant in its use of land and water. So we talk about this a lot on this show. And I just really wanted to bring in a water expert exactly to highlight the issues that we're having with water. I'll take this opportunity to share my screen one more time, because we've talked a lot about the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs of the United Nations. So here's a nice graphic on the right, at least for me, it's the right, might be the left for you guys. The 17 goals as put forth by the United Nations, these are the Sustainable Development Goals. And when Thomas talks about how society, governments, and capital markets are all converging to want the same thing, now wanting the same thing isn't actually acting for the same thing, but they're all starting to converge in the same way. It's because we're starting to have metrics available so that we can actually not greenwash and just say you're being a good corporate steward, but actually be one. And to actually be one, then you have to have measurable goals that you can be compared against. So one of those goals is set forth by the United Nations. They are these 17 goals: no poverty, zero hunger. So here at Plant-Based Innovation and Alternative Proteins, we're, addressing food insecurity by being more efficient with our resources to produce more food. Good health and well-being. Obviously, we all want that. quality education, gender equity. Goal 6, this is what Thomas is working on: clean water and sanitation. He's dedicating his life to this. Number 7, I just want everyone to know that what's out there. Number 7, affordable and clear energy. Number 8, decent work and economic growth. Number 9, industry innovation and infrastructure. Of course, when we have a shift of the entire global food supply system, we are also working on number 9. Number 10, reduced inequalities. So sorry to say, talk about VegTech again, but here I would say, as we work on alternative proteins and plant-based innovation, we are looking for fewer inequalities in food distribution. Thomas is also working on this. Thomas, you're working on number 10 as much as number 6. Number 11, sustainable cities and communities. Number 12, responsible consumption and production. Both Thomas and I are working on that. 13, climate change. 14, life below water. We're all working on this, both Thomas and I. 15, life on land, obviously working on that. 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. 17, partnerships for the goals. So when you see institutions like the United Nations and also the SEC work on really not just naming the goals, but measuring them, then I think we're close to getting systematic change. Would you agree, Thomas?
I would fully agree. Thank you for pointing it out. And my call to action to all listeners and viewers is really, if you please would be so kind and take one look at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And I want to even go further. See if there's one specific goal, at least one specific goal you can identify with, align with, and kind of like make that as part of your new DNA going forward. And just commit your life and your thoughts and your actions towards that and see what happens in your life.
Mm-hmm. I love that, but I will take what you say. We'll get a game of poker here. I'll take what you say and I raise you. Yes, it's about you and your individual changes, but it's also about aligning your dollars with your values. So you might lessen your shower. Okay, but make sure you take your dollars and you only spend them on the corporations, the products that you believe in. It doesn't take that much research. I do have to say, thank you, Google, for that. It's not that hard. You can figure out where you want to invest your dollars, either in the capital markets or just where you want to invest them in the grocery store. You want to be, or at whatever kind of shopping you do. You want to make sure that you're aligning your dollars, your purchases with your values. Then I really think you'll see change.
Yes, I agree. And let me say to that, we can debate and discuss the voting system, but again, vote first and foremost with your dollar. We are still living in capitalism, and capitalism is evolving to surely to a more evolved form of sustainable capitalism, equitable capitalism, about stakeholders. You're all a stakeholder. There's 7.8 billion stakeholders on the planet. Vote and leverage your dollar.
Agreed. And when you couple that with your voice too, we're talking about a lot of things. I don't want people to feel inundated, but you get out there and vote. You use your dollars in the places where you think they're used best, and you couple that with your voice. That's in your vote, but also as you see injustices happening with water, land, food. You make your voice known, and I do think we'll see change. In this way, I'm hopeful. Thomas, are you hopeful?
Absolutely. It's all about faith, hope, and action.
Oh, I love what you say. Okay. What do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
10 years ago, I was 47. The only thing that comes up is I wish that I would have realized how short and precious life is, and that every single minute counts. So make it count.
I love that. I'll underscore that and say, and you are so incredibly powerful. When you decide to make it count, people, you realize just how powerful you are, and things can change in your lifetime. I know that's what I'm going for. But not every day works out as you would like. So if you're having a bad day and you're just trying to sort of get back in the groove, what's the phrase that you say to yourself to get back up and running?
Me?
Yeah. What's the phrase you say? Yeah.
What do I say? God is good.
Ah, okay. So you are a man of faith. I see. This is wonderful. Now, we did say we wanted to hear your favorite snack. Did you actually land on one that doesn't use too much water?
Well, I said to my wife, what about a glass of water? And she said, that's not a snack, Thomas. Sorry.
No, that's not a snack.
So I think for the time being, I have to stay with a cup of kernels of popcorn, which is 127 liters. Still a lot, but...
Okay, but it's less than 500 for 1 pound of chicken, which doesn't even feed a family of 4.
Yeah.
So I will say
the banana actually is 400 to 600 liters, not gallons. let's talk
Liters. Okay. Well, I'll say end on a happy note. If you are making popcorn, I use Bragg's amino acid. Certainly
Okay.
don't use butter, but even to cut calories, I don't even use olive oil. I often use Bragg's amino acid and a little bit of nutritional nooch. It's called nutritional yeast. So that's kind of a spin on your quintessential popcorn. But if it is the summer and you're going to see movies, or you're having movies, you're watching Netflix and you've got new movies, air popped popcorn and extra virgin olive oil and salt. These are things that will just keep you happy for a very long time. So,
Elizabeth, what is your favorite snack?
Often popcorn. I'm not kidding. I have it for dinner. I air pop my popcorn. I use Bragg's amino acids, a little bit of nutritional yeast, and my partner's always like, "Where's dinner?" I'm like, "I'm eating it." It's a huge bowl of popcorn. Oh my word! I want to thank you, Thomas Schumann, for all that you do,
Very much.
for taking your entire skill set, your voice, your wallet, your brains, your smarts, your faith, your heart, and for using it for change in your lifetime, my lifetime, and for everybody listening. I am so deeply grateful. If people would like more information, where should they go?
ThomasSchumann.com. ThomasSchumann.com.
So that's a double N, folks.
Double
Thomas Schumann, double N at the end.com. Everybody, I will see you next Tuesday. Everybody, thank you for being with me. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Thomas. Stay put. We've got lots to talk about. I'll have you back. So many questions about water, folks. Thanks for being here, everybody. See you.